on, testing, testing. That works. Okay, great. All right, folks, welcome and to day 2 of our AI Fringe event series here at UCL. Yesterday we talked mainly about AI and the social implications of AI, and today we're going to focus a little bit more on responsible innovation and AI. So we've got a couple of panel sessions coming up. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be moderating the first one. But today is also kind of a special day for us because we are launching our venture program. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what that is to start with. So basically, UCL, if you don't know, has been quite successful in AI and spin-outs and startups over the years. We totted it up recently. Marina can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but the total amount of acquisition cost is pushing a lot of money. I'm getting bad looks from Marina here.
Costs, but in terms of valuation of our computer science portfolio.
Yeah, the valuation. Am I allowed to say publicly what the companies have been acquired for, or?
No.
I'm not allowed to say. I'm not. Okay. Okay. All right. Risks aside. But anyway, it's very, very large amount of money. So we've had a whole string of very successful spin-outs and over the last, say, 5 years. And there's a whole bunch of them also in the pipeline. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how that happened and maybe how to get more of them. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of a sense of how startups begin basically at UCL. So a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them come through a collaboration between an academic and their PhD students, right? So typically an academic might have an idea and they might sort of get then a team to help out with that, and that often is the PhD students. So it can be the postdocs as well. But actually the UK is also, you may have heard, coming under a lot of pressure in academia in terms of funding PhD studentships. So in other words, the amount of studentships that are available in the UK, PhD studentships has gone down somewhat significantly. So all universities are under pressure for this. So what this means is that traditional pipeline that we've had from PhD studentships, then starting companies and then hopefully doing very well, that pipeline in the UK is under threat, because if there are no PhD students, there won't be any teams to found startup companies and spin-outs, right? So that's a big challenge for UK academia. So we know from experience that AI is a very strong sector, right? Students really love to do this. We have a lot of track record success in that sense. Academics also love to do this. I don't have exact numbers, but my sense is that probably around 50%, at least of the AI center academics, have probably made their own startup company already. So this is popular from both the academics and from the students as well. So that's a very important thing. So how are we going to make this work, right? Given that the number of PhD studentships is going down, what can we do? So we had the idea that maybe what we could do is we could reach out to investors, whether or not they are VCs or whether or not they are industry people and enterprises typically, and say to them, well, look, if you want to have a part of a startup company, or maybe be involved in some way, you would like to make investment in that, you can't now do it at the latter stages of a PhD because there won't be any enough capacity in terms of the pipeline of PhD studentships coming through. There's just not enough of them. So why don't you alternatively invest right at the beginning? Why don't you say, well, look, here's money, an investment to make a PhD studentship, with the view that studentship would actually ultimately become a spin-out company, right? So rather than waiting until the end of an existing PhD, right from the beginning is baked in that the student, the academic, and the investor are all motivated to make a spin-out within that particular topic, right? So we then make sure the student is academically qualified, of course, but they're also entrepreneurially qualified in the sense that they're fully invested in that particular topic, and they're going to work then with the investors and the university to make that spin-out a success. So that's what we're going to call the venture PhD program. And there's a corresponding venture postdoc program where industry and investors can actually pump money into, say, a 2-year postdoc for it with a similar view that the goal is to make a spin-out company at some point during the stage of that investment, either the PhD or the postdoc. So this is the venture PhD, venture postdoc model, and it's going through pilot right now. So I'm very happy to say that in some sense this is the official launch right today. But we've already got investors on board, VCs as well. So we're very hopeful that this will be a success. We've got the first students already starting in January next year, 2024, and there's hopefully others going to start soon. So we expect some of the postdocs also to be starting in October 2024. So there should be flyers eventually spread around. If not, please just contact us, either myself or somebody at the AI Centre. So I'm David Barber. I should have said, oh gosh, I forgot to say who I am. So I'm David Barber. I'm the director of the AI Centre. I did say this yesterday, which is why I forgot to say it today. But you can just email us. If you email my name, David Barber, you can Google my name, you can find my email very easily. But just contact any of us, please, if you're interested in the venture PhD or venture postdoc scheme. All right. So we can talk more about that later if you've got questions about it. Right now, though, we're going to have a panel. All right. So I'd like to invite my first panel guests to come up, please. And you can sit wherever you like. So we've got lovely Marina. She's from UCL Business, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the UCL's perspective on these things. We've got Seb Hunt, who's from sort of a VC. He'll tell him about himself. We've got Nakash from another very large financial investor, and we've got Aidan from a startup. So maybe it might be good, Marina, and we'll go around, we'll start with you. Just say 1 minute about your thoughts and why you're here and what your role is in general.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David. So I'm Marina Santilli. I'm Associate Director at UCL Business, which is the commercialization company. Excuse me for. Oh, sorry. Yes, I need that. Does it? Yes, it works just like this. So UCL Business is the commercialization company for University College London. We are also a wholly owned subsidiary of the university. I've worked alongside the computer science department in this role for around 15 years, supporting inventions and innovations, taking them through into spin-outs and also licensing opportunities. So work a fair amount with industry, work a lot with investors, work a lot with academics and other entrepreneurs in the field to help everything come together to make successful outcomes for the great innovation that's going on at UCL. As David mentioned, we've been very active in computer science specifically over the past 10 years or so with a number of successful outcomes. For example, one of our first AI companies, if you like, was Satalia, which was acquired about 3 years ago now by WPP. And we've also had a number of other spin-outs in the space related to AI. So Odin, which is more of a medical device using AI for image recognition fundamentally. So there are a whole number of them, as well as alongside a lot of licensing opportunities that we do. So my personal kind of mission, if you like, at UCL Business has been to improve the transparency of what we do, both to externals as well as to within the academic teams themselves, to make it easier to engage with the whole entrepreneurship, commercialization, translation agenda. So the couple of things that I've introduced, one is our Portico Ventures framework, which was launched a few years ago and is effectively a template model for creating a spin-out where we're licensing into that spin-out software, data, know-how for effectively fixed equity, which has been very popular, as you can imagine, with academics and investors alike. And then on the licensing side, I've introduced a tool called Elucid, which we developed at UCL Business and enables it's effectively a public storefront, so to enable industry to and the general public to access intellectual property that's generated at the university on transparent terms, pricing, etc. So there's a lot of it's about transparency and being able to engage easily with industry and others. So probably more than a minute. I shall hand over to Seb.
Hello, I'm Seb. Nice to meet everyone. So I represent UCL Tech Fund. UCL Tech Fund is an early stage investor into UCL IP, both life sciences and physical sciences. I'm lucky enough to do the physical sciences because I know very little about squishy biology and things like that. But I've worked closely with David Barber on a number of his startups actually, and Human Loop is one of our portfolio, and one of the first venture PhDs. It's coming out through David Barber's lab, and we're working to write that up now. We work closely with UCLB on a number of opportunities, and we go really, really early stage investing. It's kind of like venture building meets early stage VC. Yeah, it's great to meet everyone, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Hi everyone, Nikesh Shah here. I'm an executive director at PGIM Real Estate. So PGIM Real Estate is a global real estate manager. It's a subsidiary of Prudential Financial. So we are, in terms of our AUM, we are third largest in the world with 210 billion asset under management. My role is actually, I work with our CEO to look at our really overall kind of innovation strategies and how we can actually embed innovation into our organization. And more importantly, how can actually use our kind of platform to create more innovation and more would say ventures in the space. So for that reason, we launched a new venture or new lab 3 weeks ago called Real Asset X. So the whole purpose of this lab is to partnering with universities. So we just announced a partnership with University UCL. We opened a center together in Shoreditch. Really fun PhD students with a real, we call it, it's a real problems, real solutions, and applications. So we will really together figure out real challenging issues, focus on sustainability and AI, and use our the academic research and the experience and expertise that we bring in terms of monetizing that or commercializing that, and then of course deploying into our assets and across the industry. So really exciting. We have got 4 universities now globally partnering, and every one of them actually focusing on different types of areas: AI or data, sustainability, green materials, etc. And this, I genuinely believe that we need more innovation, more collaboration between industries and academics. So and venture PhD, I think we started talking about venture PhD a year ago, that we were like, okay, we'll be happy to fund PhD, but there has to be a venture after that. So I think it's great to see that it's now coming to fruition. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nikesh. Hi, everyone. I'm Aidan. I'm Associate Professor at UCL Energy Institute, but also founder and CTO at Carbon Re, which is a spin out from my energy and AI lab. So I've been working in AI and sustainability for the last kind of 6 years. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I took the plunge to set up a startup, which was a Portico venture, which was also funded by UCL Tech Fund. So really great to be here on the panel and to be having this discussion with everyone.
Great, thanks everybody. Of course, I forgot to do the housekeeping at the beginning, but just another couple of notes is that for those of you that are listening online, there's a Slido. Hopefully you've got the link. It's on the YouTube channel. So please do ask questions. I should also thank everybody, the organisers, of course, as well. You know, the UCL team, Olive, Virgia, etc., and iSeed as well for the wonderful lunch, which is going to be available after these sessions. So, all right. I'm going to jump into our first question. You know, London in general has been super successful in AI. It's not just UCL. I thought it might be good to put it to you, Seb. You know, so what are the strengths, in your opinion, of the London ecosystem?
Does this work?
Yeah.
So yeah, as you said, it's not just UCL, but I do think that the caliber of the universities in London plays a major part of that, and the connectivity to Oxbridge as well as Central Europe. I think at the end of the day, having synergies and network effects and spillover effects is exactly what kind of drove Silicon Valley back in the day towards what it is today. And I think London is primed to have that same sort of acceleration of venture growth. I think that's combined with the fact that there's a mature VC ecosystem, a funding ecosystem that knows what it is to go and create outlier type companies, and a increasing realization in Europe that, you know, really backing outlier focused companies is how you go and transform the world. And I think also, you know, examples such as DeepMind and the talent that comes out of there to go and inspire and spin out other companies off the back of research that is at the intersection of industry and academia inherently, that creates a nice melting pot opportunities that are rarely seen in many other cities, frankly, around the world. And I think as a result, you're seeing that bloom. And there's a reason why even a lot of North American companies view London as an AI capital, where talent is relatively cheap as well, compared to America, but the expertise is incredible and world class. So I think that combination is a rare find.
Yeah, I think on top of that, so I think government support, I think an investment into space, I think we've seen it, but we would hope that it continues. And I think we want to see, especially the government's election year coming, we want to make sure that we have commitment from both of the opposition or the current government to really continue to invest into this technologies, AI, and I think the other factor is it's really become kind of hub in terms of we've talked about real estate perspective. So I think London came the top in terms of number of companies that you have. What it creates then is an ecosystem of entrepreneurs and VCs, and then you have a lot of collaboration. So we are in very, I would say, lucky position in London that we have that. My role is global, and I do go across many different cities, and it's very difficult. It's from a space perspective and language as well from perspective. So I think, especially if anyone, for example, I speak a lot of startups. Anyone wants to go and expand into US, the first stop is London. Because of language, Anglo-Saxon, etc. But anyone who wants to go to Europe from North America also comes into London first. So it's like a stop, and I think we're in a very good space in terms of where we are from a geography perspective, but also from a government kind of investment perspective.
Just yesterday we had a lot of discussion about social implications and regulation as well. I just wanted to. Anybody feels able to respond. I mean, how is that going to affect the London ecosystem in AI? Is it, what would you like to see in terms of regulation? Is it, and responsible AI in general, is that going to affect us? Is it an opportunity or a threat?
We were just talking about this actually. So, to be honest with you, I think if you look at the EU and compare that to the US, I mean, we always say in terms of all the technologies, there's two extremes. As you said, I think responsible AI or responsible technology itself is going to be very important. I think we've got to have a balanced view. I know we have a kind of AI safety summit or AI summit. We want to make sure that there's some practical regulations, or we think that there's already regulations already baked into the underlying sectors that could be just used. We don't need to create new regulations. So I think we want sensible approaches. We don't want to see where it's quite license-based in regulation that we have to license each and every model. We do see there's a huge risk in terms of there's a biasness there, there's a privacy issues, etc. But I believe our kind of underlying systems are there in terms of data privacy and all the other matters. So I think we would like to see a balanced view, and I know the government is setting up some committee or something like that. So we bring all types of people. A diverse opinion is very important. Academia, from a tech, and also from. But what we don't want is a monopolization of AI, right? So that can happen because that's where majority of the companies are. So I think we want definitely some regulation in that space that is not monopolized, and I mean the wider community, wider society is beneficial, not from a user perspective, but also from financial perspective. Use that. So we would love to see those types of policies.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, from a kind of early stage startup perspective, I think you do need a balance in the regulation, right? And AI technology is accelerating really fast, and it's really hard to predict what's coming next. But I do think recognizing that over-regulation is something that will stymie the growth of really, really incredible early stage startups if it's overly burdensome, and will inherently kind of push towards large enterprise, right? Because it's large enterprise that can afford to abide by really stringent regulations, and they're already ahead of the game. So I think the one caution is just to make sure that, as we're saying, it's practical regulation that still allows for innovation and growth. But obviously safety is paramount, and understanding how these systems are going to have impact the world ethically and financially is still of paramount importance.
I think the only thing I'd add is that I think as with all regulation, it will evolve over time. So although there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment, which is, I think, holding people back potentially, because we don't know quite what this regulation is going to be, I think, it'd be nice to have a starting point, but on the understanding that regulation will evolve as the technology will evolve and as the, people's understanding of what the implications are. So I think the sooner we have a baseline to understand what that first set of policies or regulations going to be, the better for certainly spin-outs who are, worrying about, how far can I go with A, B, or C as a starting point.
Great, thanks. So actually, I want to bring Aidan in here when talking about spin-out. So, basically, if you're in AI, like you're a student or a researcher, you're kind of hot. Basically, people want to hire you, and there's all kind of interesting things you could do with your life. So if you're a talented AI researcher, why on earth wouldn't you want to go and work at one of the large tech organizations? You get paid, a shed load of money, and maybe it's fun, loads of compute. So why on earth did you want to make a startup company?
Yeah, really good question. I think this is a long-standing question. This could have been asked kind of 20 years ago about kind of people becoming quants in banks and any of those kind of situations. There's always been that draw to go into a corporate environment and take a large salary. I think the issue with AI is it's kind of now on steroids, where the battle for talent is just so fierce and competitive that the rewards are kind of astronomical. I would kind of say to like young AI researchers now that there is the opportunity to kind of build your reputation and to build your identity as a researcher in the field, and that it's much easier to do that as a kind of independent, whether it's a postdoc or as a researcher in a lab. You have more autonomy and more independence once you're outside of those large corporates. So again, there's always that trade-off between having control over your own research agenda, having control over what you work on, and also the visibility that you get from those kind of positions. So again, at a startup, for example, you'd be one of 3 or 4 people working in a team together versus one person in 500. The journey of a startup from 0 to 100K in revenue is really exciting. If you increase Google's revenue by 100K, nobody cares. So there is that opportunity for impact and the opportunity for visibility that I would say is really unique to a startup and really unique to small scale ventures. But again, obviously large corporates have their place in the world and they have resources and the ability to have impact at a scale that is significant. So there's always a trade-off between the two, and no one size fits all, I guess. But yeah, for young researchers, I would say think about that decision versus doing it now or doing it in 2 or 3 years once you've built up a kind of a significant reputation and identity.
Aidan, I also wanted to. That was great, but in your personal case, I mean, your particular organisation is obviously on the environmental side. I mean, so there's more than just the sort of you can do what you want and blah 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 blah. But is there a more social or some kind of other motivation which spurred you to do what you're doing?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're a mission-driven organization where our mission is to, reduce carbon emissions by gigatons, and that's very transparent in everything we do. Everything is aligned with that mission. You might see, Facebook launch an initiative to reduce the energy consumption in their data centers, but that's a side hustle. That's not their main mission. That's not what drives their bottom line. For us, our identity and our kind of livelihood is entirely aligned with that mission. If we don't achieve it, we don't succeed. So again, there is that. Their organizations have different priorities, and which priority comes first is something you should really consider when you're looking at all of these opportunities that you might have as a researcher to go into. So yeah, that's kind of been that's helped our ability to attract talent, folks who are really interested in the mission, want to get behind it, and do have other opportunities elsewhere, but have kind of made that decision to work in this space because of the meaning and the value that it gives them personally.
Great, thank you. Well, as you can imagine, I've got other questions, but you might have questions as well for us. Does anybody have a question? Yeah, thank you. You might need the mic, actually, yeah.
Hi, Taryn speaking. I'll be speaking in a minute on the panel as well. I had a question about what does good look like for investment? And I was looking at the UK much vaunted "we want to be a superpower in AI" and the AI strategy in 2021 and 2022. And then they had the headline figure 2.4 billion. And then you look at the detail, and it's since 2014. And it just seems like the wrong order of magnitude. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on, what does good look like in terms of investment? How should it be targeted to have maximum effect?
Hello. Yeah. So I mean, that's quite a broad question, but I think what does good look like and why in particular for London? As I mentioned, I think the real edge that London has is a strong, deeply technical base of knowledge, right? And so when you think about these really large rounds that are being raised in, say, North America and different things, often it's to scale GPUs, right? And that's a later stage almost kind of consideration. What I look for in technical companies and AI companies is a differentiated insight, right? So something that is novel in of itself. It's applying to a new problem, often at an interdisciplinary space where, tech bio is the kind of gleaming example of that, and it has its own issues. But like, how do you apply your knowledge of AI to a specific problem within a domain that then is defensible? I think you're right? Like, at the end of the day, the UK government doesn't have US government money, so they're not going to be able to compete head to head in terms of just pumping money into an ecosystem. And I think realizing that and recognizing that, and so playing to your advantages as the UK, which is primarily that we have incredible universities here that are doing incredible research. And I think really leveraging and focusing in on the deep tech opportunities that come about because of that. And then, if you can demonstrate problem solution fit within these spaces, you're not limited to UK investment, right? You can bring in these US funders that can provide that scale up journey growth, right? The hundreds of millions that you may require at some point to scale your model using GPUs. But for me, good looks like a deeply technically differentiated offering, addressing a major problem in the world. And I think if you keep focused on that, the UK does have a competitive advantage there.
I would say, really adding the incentivization, like why would a entrepreneur come and do the business here? I mean, we have this the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act by US, where we basically, and they're going to give a lot of subsidies, a lot of tax credits and stuff like that to the companies that are reducing carbon emission, and you have to show that. That's going to really push a lot of very climate tech companies into the US market. So I think we and UK, but the EU as overall, we need to look at how we can incentivize either through, for example, people applying for work visas or innovation visas much easier and quicker, and having so subsidies and setting up the company, making more the whole process easier. So I think it's all. We look at. I mean, I work at a lot of startup companies. I own my own startup companies. It's like, what is the regime that's more efficient for us, and where we can actually attract more capital without having too much tax for our investors. So there are a lot of things there. So. But I think UK is well positioned compared to other regions. Of course, US is leading for sure, but I think we can compete with the rest of the EU.
To kind of answer the question, the negative, what bad looks like is kind of the current situation, I guess, in terms of what we have in terms of success stories. So if we think about ARM, the kind of chip manufacturer or chip designer, they've never really scaled to the level of a HP or to kind of level of a major manufacturer like Intel. Same with DeepMind as well. They're successful because they were acquired, essentially. There was no scope for them to go and become a Google. They had to take that route of getting acquired in order to have the success that they've had. So in some sense, we might be doing very well at the early stage, for example, but we haven't seen a company grow to that level of major kind of world player in the UK. We don't have a UK Google, we don't have a UK Facebook, we have offices here, but the idea, there should be, given the tech talent and the tech initiative and innovation that we have, there should be that scale of impact. And until we see that, I don't think it will have counted as a success.
Great, thank you. Just as I'm going to go to an online question. Thank you, online. So how can universities encourage and incentivize spin-outs to be more open about their data sources they use to train their algorithms? So this is obviously in relation to responsible AI. How can we be more open about the data sources? How can we encourage our spin-outs to be more open?
Happy to start with that. I think it is tricky. Often data is a competitive advantage. It can be the moat for your company going forward, your access to data and how much you've acquired and accumulated over a period of time. In terms of being open with it, again, there are challenges with, if it's private, secure data, should you be making it available? Can you do so and then be commercially viable as well? So open makes sense for certain applications, and for other applications it doesn't. We would have a lot of restrictions around making available proprietary data from manufacturers that we work with on how much they were producing. We couldn't share that information because it would be distorting the competitive layout of the market. So again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Again, you do want to kind of give back to the AI community and to kind of spur innovation as well through, the way that we do things has been very open with Kaggle challenges and things like that. But I guess there's always a balance between the considerations you have to take into account in terms of being commercially focused while adhering to the AI kind of ethos, I guess.
Just to, I guess, clarify the question almost, and so as Aidan says, the data itself is an asset of the company. Is the question about being able to validate the data or to assess it for ethical bias or any of these other kind of issues that we kind of consider when we're looking at the ethics of AI? Is that the background behind the question?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would imagine it's probably about.
The way I read it is that you've got to be open about how you're training those models and where the data is coming from.
Yeah.
That's why I read into it. So, I mean, that's something.
Yeah, I think that's the.
That's your holy grail. Right? I mean, if you can expose that to everyone, then there are a lot of open source models out there.
Yeah, I mean, I should say that there was I forgot to say that there was the word generative actually in the question, generative AI. So I suspect that the questioner is interested in, well, if you think about generative AI, there's a lot of data that's used, obviously to train these models. A lot of that is scraped from the internet. People may or may not have given their permission to do that. There might be copyright issues. There are a lot of regulatory, legal challenges as well around this now. People are, going to litigation about these topics. But also us as individuals, maybe we have the right for our data to be removed from these systems, et cetera, et cetera. Currently, is that something that universities are thinking about, investors are thinking about? How are we? Is it even a topic? I think that's really what the question is about. And how, if not, why not?
So I think from an investment perspective, again, it's about striking this balance, right? Like, we do want to invest in companies that are building incredible solutions to big problems. For AI, you need good data to do that. I think this is where the importance of good regulation comes in, right? I don't think it's really for the university or for an investor to make decisions on what is appropriate or not appropriate to be in a data source. I think if that starts to happen, our incentives are skewed. They don't align with the kind of general population in that whose data maybe we're using. And so we're happy and would, of course, encourage our spin-outs and our startups to abide by the regulations that are put forth by people that are in better place to understand the kind of ethical implications and the trade-offs there. I think, obviously, in terms of a right for your data not to be used, I mean, if you ask me on a personal level, then I think that's something that we need to explore better. We need to understand at a technical level how we can even identify where data comes from through the models that we're using. As it comes out on the other end, how do I data lineage effectively, right? How do I actually understand that process? But I think this underscores the importance of, AI regulation and the role that policymakers have in that.
Yeah, so from the corporate perspective, I think we are looking at a lot of generative AI solutions. I think one of the questions, for example, I mean, even some of the big players using, I think one of the questions we actually asking, and it's actually across the corporate world, data kind of understanding who owns the data, what we can use it for. We might have some data, but we can't use it for everything. So this is very fundamental. Every time we bring a technology company or AI solution, we can say, okay, we got data, but can we use it for this training or not? So I think for us, it's very important to understand what are the sources, how you train the data, do you own it? Do you have the permissions? And are you scraping it? Are you anonymizing it or stuff like that? So this, for us, we wouldn't go into a technology which we don't understand data and how it's been acquired.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions at this point from the audience? Don't be shy. No. Okay. So I'm going to move on to my next question. So Marina, you've been at UCL for a while, as I have as well, and things, of course, are always changing in terms of the relationship between industry and universities and the commercialization opportunities. So what's changed over the years, and how would you like to see that change in the future, the relationship between industry and academia?
So in terms of one of the biggest changes I've seen since I've joined is the focus from funders, in particular research funders, on impact being important for researchers, and that it's not just simply about the act of doing the research and great new inventions, but actually what will that impact have going forward. Now, obviously there are many different types of impact, of social impact, of financial impact, but in terms of a lot of academics are looking to interpret that as impact for a commercial impact fundamentally, and that's driving, I think, a lot more integration with industry. So I think that has opened up many more opportunities, which again have been government backed in terms of a lot of funding programs encouraging collaboration between industry and academia. And one of the things we've touched on earlier is this need to have problems to solve. So one of the problems with fundamental research is that it is fundamental research and is not often looking towards a problem in industry to solve. So the more we have these collaborations with industry at the earliest stage, directing some types of research, and I'm not saying lots of research should be blue sky and should stay that way, but there is certainly more opportunity for industry to direct certain elements of research such that they're aiming towards solving problems that we can then build spin-outs around, arrange licensing agreements around. And this is, I think, relevant to your venture program that you've launched, and that's kind of one of the purposes of it, is to start a PhD or a postdoc program with focus from industry typically as to what is the problem you're trying to solve, and trying to solve that with solving a research problem. So I think that's really positive for us in terms of what we're trying to do in kind of commercialization, in that it's less, well, there's always going to be a technology push angle. I'm sure everybody's heard of that phrase. But having an application to which we are marketing, if you like, our spin out or our licensing opportunity makes it a lot easier and hopefully more impactful in society, in the world, in the UK, etc. So more of that would be great. So people from industry, there are many programs open within UCL. Venture Programme is obviously a new one, but there are many others which are government-backed as well, that enable more cooperation and collaboration at the earlier stages of research so that we can have these more targeted outputs.
So I just wanted to, there has been criticism from the broader investment community about the role UK academia has played, or universities have played, in investment. So if you think about, for example, a typical university, the amount of equity they might like to take in a spin out has been criticised, quite broadly by the investment community. UCL has stood out actually a little bit from that crowd in terms of we've taken a very low equity stake in the spin outs. Where did that come from, and what's your thoughts about that?
So I think it's important to say in some cases we take a low equity stake, and I mentioned earlier the Portico Ventures framework we introduced specifically for a subset of opportunities where they're founder-led, where they need less support from the tech transfer office, where, as in Aidan's case, they have some intellectual property which is more around copyright materials, so for example software, potentially data, know-how, etc., and just making it easy to move that across exclusively into the company, and the founder takes it forward with some support from the tech transfer office. Obviously we have the tech fund that we can invest in if it's appropriate, and other forms of funding. But I think maybe UCL have been doing this a long time. So UCL Business has been around for 30 years, so we have lots of experience. And the market has changed over that 30 years as well. So I think we learn as we go, we adapt to what's appropriate. At the end of the day, we want to make the returns that come back to the tech transfer office end up with the university. We're a wholly owned subsidiary. Don't forget that also other inventors that are not part of the spin-out benefit through the equity we hold through standard revenue share policy. So, a lot of it is distributed back out. The majority of it is distributed back out. So when I'm looking at negotiating spin-outs that are not under this standard template framework, I'm basically looking for what I call a win-win-win. So win for the founders, win for the investors, and a win for the university. And it is possible. You just need to have some flexibility, some experience, and in understanding what everyone wants to achieve at the end and what makes it an investable proposition. So we don't want to set up the foundations for a company where an investor says, we're never going to invest in that. It doesn't reward the right behaviors. But I think there's also a lot of people that get hung up in comparing us with the US. I think taking a deeper look at the US models is worth doing, because they may take small equity stakes, but they take huge royalty stakes. So we try, in a lot of cases, certainly in engineering, physical science spin-outs, to not take cash out of early stage businesses. So we don't often have a royalty share at all. And sometimes when we do, it's offset with a lower equity stake. So we've got things to play with, but people need to look at it in the round, not just looking very specifically as what is the equity, and because that's a very one-dimensional way, and it doesn't tell the whole story.
Great. We have a question from the audience.
Unless anyone else has a question. It's very common for PhD students to experience burnout, mental health issues. I've seen some of the most motivated and positive people that I know feel really down at stages of their PhD. It's also very common for startup founders to experience burnout. So how would you avoid this in the venture program? How do you support people if you want them to be successful?
So I think that's a broader question for our generation in some ways. But in terms of burnout for startups and PhDs, I think you're right? A lot of that burnout comes from, immense pressure and a need to take ambiguity and make something concrete from it. We want to invest in companies that can go and solve massive problems and become incredibly big. And the only way you can do that is if you have founders that can continue to commit, not just for a year or two, but 7 years. And so our priority is to make sure that we are giving the support for those founders to be able to achieve those goals. I think the other bit to remember is, of course, we want to invest in teams and founders that are ambitious and won't give up. But the reality is that VC and TTOs and everyone, we play a game of power laws. And so the fact that it's a power law means that we're not going to hold you accountable if something goes wrong in your life and you just can't continue, right? That's absolutely fine. We all win by our winners winning, right? That's a fundamental reality, and one that I think the US realized a long time before the UK did, that you are better off having a slightly larger portfolio where you can have smaller equity cuts throughout, and therefore you don't have to hyper-focus on every single one of your companies succeeding, and that creates space for failures, right? And failures are necessary for us to achieve anything in this world. And so I'm fully supportive of people that need to take a break, that people that need to, maybe walk away from it, and that's part of the human experience.
Hayden, burnout?
I'll mention quickly one thing. So I had my own startups. I think most of the time you're spending actually fundraising. So when you finish a fundraise, you're already looking at the next fundraise. You look at your burn rate and all that stuff. That's really is stressing actually, because I've now on an advisory board on a few of the startups, and it's the whole discussion is around, we need to fundraise in 6 months' time. And second is the customer acquisition, right? So if you are in the market, that is 2 key issues. And I think I would say that's one of the reasons that we set up the Real Asset Acts, actually, that we bring. Of course, we are one of the largest real estate players, so customer is there already, so we can actually really spin out. And also from an investment perspective, we will actually support these companies from really funding. So really the student or PhD should be focusing on just the product right now. Of course, when you commercialize it, they need to build in those entrepreneurial skills around how you sell and stuff like that. But really, I think that's where industry can help and become a partner to these startups rather than a customer to these startups. So that's 2 cents.
So again, this kind of ties to the venture PhD program, which again I think is like such a fantastic idea and a really exciting opportunity for people to go into. But I think the best base for doing a startup is doing a PhD, because it's entirely your project. You know, your supervisor is there; he's there to help, but you know whether you succeed or fail is entirely down to you. And you know, ultimately, you'll go so far with the research that your supervisor can just kind of talk in general terms about it, but you'll be so deep into it, the only person who can kind of get you out of those dark days is you. So that correlates very well in terms of the sense of responsibility that you need to have a startup. Again, you have to solve the problem. It doesn't matter if you're burnt out or not. You really have to just solve the problem. And it's kind of ultimately how much you want to make progress and how much you want to kind of go forward with it. Again, you can always, you know, take a break and take a weekend and kind of take some time off, but you have to have that sense of responsibility that you know the problem better than anybody. There's nobody available to help you. If you've gone the right way, you've kind of gone deep enough into it that you are the experts. So if there's a problem that needs to be solved, it's going to come from you, and that's the joy of it, and that's also the cross of it to bear in some sense. And when I talk to prospective PhD students, I always tell them it's more of a spiritual challenge than an intellectual challenge. You know, you've made it to this far, you've got the intellectual, you know, capacity to do this. It's whether you have the kind of resilience and the ability to kind of keep going with it to see it to a conclusion, because you know, that's another skill set altogether, and it's not a reflection on anybody if they don't make it through. And not all my PhD students have graduated, so I've been in that position of seeing people kind of make that choice to step back, and it's fine, but it is kind of that sense of ownership that really prepares you for a startup going forward.
Great. Well, thank you for the questions. So this is time to wrap up. I'm afraid it went very quickly, the time. Just to let you know, so there are flyers around the place about the Venture PhD program. Either contact myself, David Barber, or Tim, who's here as well. There are a bunch of flyers up at the front if you want to come and collect one. In terms of the format now, we've got a 10-15 minute break. So please come back at 10:30 for the next session.
everybody. Welcome to our next session, Data and AI for Supporting the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs for short. I'm Tim Bodley-Scott. I'm the Strategic Alliances Director for Computer Science at UCL. I'm also the author of a book called University Industry Partnerships for Positive Change, Transformational Strategic Alliances Towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So this topic is obviously something that I'm passionate about. How can new technologies such as AI lead to societal benefit? That's why I work in a university. We're a charity, we exist for the good of society. And that's what we want to see. In my view, here in the university, we exist to bring about good for society. We're a public good. So how can we, through our partnerships, achieve more of that, particularly in the area of AI? So that's what we're going to be thinking about. So I'd like to say we've got a fantastic panel here representing many different sectors, all very relevant to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So Ed, if you could please bring up, when you're ready, the SDGs onto the screen. There we go, that's great. We've got the 17 different goals that virtually every government in the world signed up to in 2015. These are meant to be achieved, by the way, by 2030. So we've only got 7 more years to actually achieve these goals. Obviously, this is a great summary, but behind this, there's lots of individual objectives and goals. In my view, goal number 17 is the most important, partnerships for the goals, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on today. So I'd like to get my panel to introduce themselves. So I'm going to pass the microphone around. If you could just speak for a minute about who you are and maybe your thoughts about, very briefly, about AI and how it can contribute to the SDGs. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Kitatani. I'm serving as the Managing Director of ICEED, otherwise known as the International Council on Environmental Economics and Development. We are a UN think tank headquartered in New York in the United Nations headquarters. We are a think tank, and so we cover many different projects and do carry out different research policy projects. But in particular, concerning AI, we are affiliated with a number of different entities, which I'd like to mention. One is the UNECE, which is the United Nations European Commission for Economics. Also the UNFCCC, that is the Framework Convention on Climate Change. We also work with the OECD AI, also the Council of Europe AI Committee, and also with the NATO AI. So with these organizations that we are working with, we're essentially trying to create a holistic monitoring process of AI policy, both on an international level and also on a local and regional level. Concerning how AI can contribute towards the implementation of the SDGs, especially SDG 17, I think that's a question that you're going to ask, or shall I answer that now?
Yeah, please give us your thoughts.
Okay. Well, this is something that I like to talk about briefly, but also perhaps talk about the elephant in the room. I think there is so much opportunity for AI to contribute towards the implementation of the SDGs, and there are many cases of that. But in particular with the 17 partnerships, one area that AI that we see that can definitely make a huge difference and impact is in the mitigation of corruption. And so this is an issue that people usually are not talking about too much, but is a prevailing issue especially in developing countries, especially when it comes to climate finance. So when it comes to, for example, giving examples of corruption of finances, to give you concrete examples, there are situations where, let's say, international organizations or foundations would contribute funds to a specific project in specific countries, mostly developing countries, or let's say at least developed countries, where the funds will then disappear once it enters the secretariat created to carry out these different types of projects. This is one of the reasons why, for example, at the Glasgow COP Summit conference, there was a huge pushback from many of the developing countries when it was proposed that the whole process of climate financing and funding should be digitalized. For for obvious reasons, for those people who understand. So if we were able to completely digitalize this climate finance process and also use AI, this will create a formidable system of accountability and transparency, and therefore will greatly reduce and mitigate, I would say almost completely, this type of corruption. So that's one example. But I think the other positive example that we're already seeing is how AI is always being used to fight climate change in terms of climate solutions, organizing and collecting and analyzing this huge data concerning environment. This is being used to create forecasts for different types of disasters, natural disasters, etc. And so this is a great example of how AI is already being used for the implementation of the SDGs in terms of climate change.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Chris Baker. I'm with Rothamsted Research in Harpenden in the UK. So Rothamsted is known as the oldest agricultural research station in the world. It's the birthplace of modern statistics. Fisher was hired there in 1913, and we had a very significant legacy in statistics. So I'm the lead of the strategic area for intelligent data ecosystems at Rothamsted. This is a group of about 40 people. We have over 300 scientists who are basically leveraging data or generating data, looking at insights from data. And we basically underpin their capabilities in extracting core nuggets of information. Rothamsted's mandate is primarily to deliver knowledge about food production. And so that's sort of unbiased knowledge, and to give that to the community. So basically, we're really into data sharing. This is a key component of this, and I guess you could call that the fuel of AI at the moment. And we have advanced capabilities for generating knowledge graphs, clearly structured knowledge that's easy to leverage and use in machine learning capabilities. We also have significant amounts of image data from farms, including phenotyping data, insect data. Many of these of the advanced image recognition technologies would help us in better identify crop pests, perhaps in real time as the tractor's moving through the field. The AI can actually help us recognize beneficial pests, beneficial insects versus pests, and helping us making decisions about when to spray and not to spray. Beyond that, we also have key interests in sustainability and resilience of the food production system. And for this, we have long-term experiments that actually we have long-term experiments that go back till 1843, which we're very well known for, looking at fertilizer additions to soils. We also have 13 years of data on experimental farms down in Devon that are actually underpinning our efforts in digital twinning. So digital twinning of farms. So digital twinnings or digital twins is a new umbrella sort of applied AI. And I think we are leading in our collaboration with the Alan Turing Institute to investigate and leverage this data set of 80 million data points collected over 13 years, and to build simulations for resilience and sustainability, looking for tipping points in the data and understanding what cycles exist there in farming. So I think that's probably plenty for now, but I'm happy to come back to this later.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Lewis Ray, so I'm here from Unilever. For those that aren't aware, Unilever's a giant consumer goods company. We've got over 400 brands in more or less every country in the world. I think the statistic is on an average day, over 3 billion people use a Unilever product. And my role specifically, I lead the manufacturing decarbonisation programme. So trying to get all of our factories to zero emissions by 2030. On that journey, we've reduced 70% by 2015. And along the way, AI is already playing a huge role in making those reductions. So again, we're investing heavily in digital twins in our factories 3 of our factories have been recognized by the World Economic Forum as being lighthouse factories, which means they're the most advanced in terms of Industry 4.0 and sustainability. So we have things like laundry powder towers, which to basically dry a slurry of detergent mixture to make laundry powders. So we can take various process parameters to optimize that for quality, energy efficiency, and it was actually our biggest, previously our highest emitting factory in Brazil, highest emitting factory in Unilever globally, has implemented these systems, and through that and our other sustainable means has reduced its emissions by 96%. But generally, I'm really happy that this conversation is happening. It's, I think, important to always bridge the cutting edge, amazing technology that we have coming out of universities and other organizations, and bridging that with the big societal problems that we're facing. So happy to be here.
Hello, so my name's Taran Rishi. I am a AI innovation consultant from About Alpha. I help businesses accelerate their goals using AI. I also help them align with their sustainable development goals. I'm also co-CEO of a non-profit called Humans for AI, which is focused on diversity, bias, and ethics within AI as well. Some of the things that I'm going to be interested talking to the other guests about and panelists is really, one of the things I would point out is when you look at these 17 goals, there are 169 targets underneath them. And if you look at the July report call to action from the UN, it paints a very poor picture, really. Out of 140 targets, 50% are off track and 30% are static or regressing. And the remainder of those targets, there's insufficient data. So what is the potential for AI? The potential for AI is to help us accelerate, but we have a number of issues. One of those issues is fragmentation of information. We're all over the place in terms of who's working on what, in terms of solutions, what policies and standards there are with different governments, what data is available, both in the UK and internationally, models for sharing and reuse, and standards as well around those models and efficiencies that we can talk about. The key thing that I would want to also explore in the discussion, if possible, is really a more practical approach in terms of we can't do everything for SDGs. So what we have to look at is where will AI have the most impact on the most important SDGs, and whether that's like, first of all, climate, health, and hunger as the top 3, we should be focusing our efforts on those if we want to make an impact.
Thank you. I'm sure you already heard me introduce myself. I'm not going to do that again. But I will actually just drill down to some of these, goals. And so I come from the real asset industry and how we're actually seeing AI is going to help us. So if you look at global kind of stats, so real estate contributes to about 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. That's quite a lot. That's one of the bigger, I would say, contributor of the carbon emission. But if you look at the buildings currently, there's about 70% of buildings or real estate is actually inefficient in terms of its consumption of energy, in terms of its usage. And if you look at by 2050, which is our kind of target to become net zero, by 2050, about 80 to 90% of these buildings will still be standing. So we can't really build our way out of this problem. So I think the way AI can help, and I'll give you a few examples. So number one really is the kind of energy efficiency in the building. So right now, I think what happens, you have a lot of manual systems. You come to an office, sometimes it's too hot or too cold. What's happening is you have a centralized system, and it's not really monitored in terms of weather. It's not monitored in terms of occupancy. And also ventilation is on and off at certain times, so it's prefigured. Most of the time, these systems are prefigured. So you're wasting around 30 to 40% of your energy just by not having an automated system. So AI, and we're already seeing a lot of technologies coming into this space that AI is able to really read all of this data and really configure your systems based on the requirement of that hour, right? So if there is more people in a room and the heat is going up, then it's going to have the AC on, and then vice versa, and ventilation on and off. If look at the air quality and say, okay, the air quality is going down, so turn the ventilation on and stuff like that. So I think that will be, I would say, these are the low-hanging fruits, and AI definitely will help. And if you look at you talk about water preservation. Water is going to be, especially drinking water, is going to be a global crisis. It's going to become more important. And if you look at statistics, right now, about 30% water that goes into building is wasted. So either through leaks or it's not used properly. So we are already seeing AI that is able to detect the leaks. I mean, there's so much actually money and so much water is wasted just because people, I mean, it takes a long time to even find out there's a leak. Then when you do find out there's a leak, you can't find out where it is, it takes a long time. So AI, we've seen a lot of AI technologies that are able to actually detect the flow of water is lower, and they can also very precisely predict where the leak is and can be. So I think that's where we think there's going to be another kind of AI solutions. Other one we talk about is I think I mentioned about 80 to 90% of building will be standing, and a lot of them will be stranded in terms of where they are in terms of their ESG credentials. So there has to be a retrofit. There has to be CapEx. They need to be reconfigured. How we do it? I mean, there's no unlimited money. If we had unlimited money, it's problem solved. But we don't have unlimited money. So AI can help. I think what Tarun mentioned about impact. AI can really help us analyze the whole building, look at all the data points, and say, okay, in terms of impact and investment, maybe it's the lighting you change, that's a more impact. Maybe it's the the glazing window that you change might have a more impact. So the AI will be able to help us really make a kind of planning of decarbonization of these assets. So, and it will do it in a sustainable way, right? So it's not like, as an investor, we need to go back and, we have to produce results financially. So it has to be financially viable as well. So I think AI can play a huge role in terms of that. And also, I think lastly, talk about, sustainable cities and communities. I mean, AI, already is playing, but will be playing with more digital twins of the building, and see what you can say intervention will help reduce, carbon emissions or increase quality of the air and stuff like that. So just want to mention a few kind of real life examples that we are thinking through. Last one is actually of course, we're going to have new builds, and the material, cement, and is if you look at is from a carbon emission perspective is really bad. So we need to have new materials, and AI is going to help us, really understand, predict, structures of materials, and that will lead to really new type of materials coming. I think billions of new materials that come that will be more sustainable and more greener in terms of how we apply it. So we're already seeing a few examples where AI is actually helping there. So.
Yeah, that is working good. Thank you very much. Some excellent examples there of how AI can actually lead to a better world. Some of them, of course, were focused on quite a few climate change, environmental benefits. But critics might say, well, all these data centers that you need for AI, they're using a lot of energy. So maybe go to Tarun. How would you respond there about the energy efficiency of the data centers themselves? That for the large language models, they require huge amounts of energy.
Well, it's a complex problem. But if we start at the top, first of all, the data centers worldwide generate more CO2 than the airline industry. It's 0.3% of global emissions. There's about 8,000 data centers, I think, worldwide at the moment. There isn't a good measurement system around the carbon value chain. I think you've alluded to refurbishment. They need to be regularly refurbished as well. So, there's not a closed cycle for that and that sort of recycling initiative as well. They're very much focused on scope 1. They're not looking at scope 2, scope 3 carbon emissions either. And then if we drill into that, we can say, well, why do we need to use a data center? So some of the things that we should be considering are, for example, model efficiencies. and how through policies and standards we can develop and drive model efficiencies as a basis and measuring those for greener compute. So looking at that, I think looking at ability to open source both data and models as well. A lot of effort goes into sourcing, cleaning good quality data. Also, there's a lot of effort that goes into starting to train a model, and there may already be a pre-trained model available that you could start from, and that comes back to that idea of information sharing, which we can talk about further. I think the other thing is that this idea of there's a 40% is going to come up a lot today as a stat. So 40% of people in most countries have access to a smartphone. What does that mean? That means that, you know, a pivot to more edge computing, using those devices, citizen science, and, you know, looking at promoting that would be really a good way to move away from these costly cloud centers. I think there's one other thing that I would want to explore later, or after the discussion, if possible, which is this idea of, and I think I was talking to Ken earlier, just before the discussion, about how many gaming consoles have we shipped. So PS5s, there's 40 million PS5s out there. And one of the questions alluded to GPU access. And so if we go back to 2012, 2013, who remembers cluster computing with PS3s and the solution for that? And is that something that universities, as well as sharing their resources in a common infrastructure, should also start looking at building out maybe open source distributed computing across those gaming stations? And there's standards out there from 2017. I think Facebook and Microsoft published ONNX. And then there's intermediate providers that you can use, like Unreal Engine and so on. So that'd be an area that, you know, if anybody wants to talk to me after this, I'd love to explore a bit more.
Thank you, Taryn. So now I'd just like to open it up to the floor. If anyone has any burning questions based on some of these examples that have been shared, please do ask a question. Anybody? Yes, we got a couple. Yeah, if you could pass the microphone.
Hi, my name is Kazunao Seito from the IC. I'm working with Ken Kitatani. I try to keep him back on track about the moderator study from the partnership. You know, the importance of the partnership things, and one of the contribution driven by the AI to the partnership is the just the accountability and the transparency scheme when the public sector and the private sector engage the like a private-public partnership, you know, projects driven by the not only the UN but also the member state of the government, and most of the those like surveillance the system implemented by the human-driven. So that if the AI can take it over, the AI probably contribute a lot of the outcomes, you know, compared to the the traditional model of the people upload the reporting system. So what do you think about the negative side of the AI implemented model compared to the traditional the people-driven? I'm just talking about the positive side, but what do you think about the negative side of it?
I think it's going to be. I think I mentioned there's going to be a short-term disruption in the labor market. So as you know, I think if you look at from a UK perspective, the deindustrialization in 1980s, it took us many years to from the manufacturing into the service industry, but there was a long time, so there were time to upskill. For the AI, I think the negative side would be, I would think, is that time scale is very short now. So from being going to completely AI type of new society. So I think in short term, there's going to be a lot of labor disruption, and that's why I think policy and government will need to come in place to create net safety for these people who will be displaced. But in long term, it's going to be a positive net impact on the jobs. For example, the PwC report recently said there's going to be 1.2 million new roles actually created because of the AI. So I would say that was negative. Another one I think alluded to, the fact is that really it's all about, really good data. So I think I mentioned that if you remove the human loop from a model, then it becomes very, very important to make sure that data is accurate and it's not biased and there's no fake. So I think that becomes more important, because if you're a human loop, you can have this gut feeling that doesn't look right. But if you just biased data or bad data, then you can end up having a really bad results. So it could be impacting your customers' experience, or could be impacting your investors, and they're looking for something. And so I think that will be much more important if you could take the human loop out of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikesh. Anyone else wanted to add to that? Yeah.
Yep. So with some of the factories that we've digitalized a lot, the people that we're working with in these factories, they're engineers, they're technicians that have worked there for decades. And in order to digitize those processes, you need to make sure that the AI specialists have a deep understanding of the process, but also vice versa. So it's a very kind of organic process where the technicians and the engineers are part of the solution. They're part of designing that machine learning system. And then what you then have organically as a result is you then have very knowledgeable engineers who have the deep understanding of the processes, but also a base level understanding of AI, which means that they can then be deployed to other factories and help accelerate the change. And most of our machine learning models, we still have human in the loop, and that's also, a lot of that is safety driven, because you can't predict, there's always going to be some contextual factor that means the human needs to be part of the loop for now. And then of course it frees up a lot of time, so we don't have operators and technicians that are responding to and monitoring individual parameters all day long and responding very reactively to signals. So it frees up a lot of their time to go and work on other more strategic improvements to the plant and drive further efficiency.
Just bouncing off what Lewis said on that, that's another area where universities can take a lead, which is the development of frameworks and models to check for bias within source data, within the approaches for training, and also using that methodology going forwards and sort of having a factual baseline for different data domains, and having models interrogate other models as to whether they actually reach that factual baseline or not.
Thank you. Another question from the back there, from Steve.
Hi. I'm interested in SDG 10 here, so reducing inequality. So to what extent can AI actually help reduce inequalities? And there are many dimensions to inequality, right? Whether that's sort of global inequalities between the North and the South, or whether it's inequalities within our society. What role does AI play in reducing inequalities, and how do we get to a reduction in inequalities from where we are now?
Thank you. Who'd like to go? Yeah, Nikesh.
Actually, I think that's actually a negative impact of AI on inequalities. So if it's not implemented properly, and you have a monopolized in terms of AI, big corporates win, and you're going to have actually more inequality, wealth inequality in the society. So that's why I think go back to actually the policies. That's where the governments and the policymaker needs to focus on to make sure that it's not monopolized.
I'd add to that in terms of a few areas. One is north-south divide. Very often the areas where we can have the most impact are countries that don't have access to good technologies. And so reducing the compliance costs across international borders, that's something that can be driven by policymakers. I think also we talked about before a greater focus on edge computing and lower tech initiatives as well with IoT devices as well. That can help as well.
Okay, I guess there are many dimensions of inequality, and I guess from our perspective, from teams building advanced simulations of farms, I can really want to point out the fact that we can do farm scale simulations, we can do catchment scale simulations, and we also are able to envision simulations that are appropriate for other locations in the world. So the idea of developing advanced understanding of the uncertainty that our models actually bring with them, and testing them in other geographies, so having a test bed in another location, we can provide an overall estimate as to whether any of the predictions that we're actually generating, simulations, outcomes for likelihood of productivity of any given crop in a given location, how accurate that might be in another set of context. So in another geography and many large agricultural companies are really testing out all of their new seed varieties in multiple locations around the world, just to probably get a better understanding of this. But the key is that models that we can develop, if they're appropriately benchmarked, we can deploy them globally. And many projects right now are attempting to, or funding proposals are attempting to build networks of equivalent research locations across the country and across the world, so that we can really get a handle on whether we can provide the accuracy that's needed for all stakeholders to rely upon, irrespective of the country they're in.
Thank you. Over to Lewis. About I think that's a good point about the global south benefiting from the AI industrial revolution through these technologies, and Taryn's point about appropriate technologies, or frugal innovation as it's known, as well, moving away from necessarily the big cloud providers towards more edge computing, citizen science initiatives, and how AI can be involved there. I think that's very interesting. Lewis.
Yep. So human rights across our value chain is a big issue. So we have about 250 factories that Unilever operates globally, but then many more kind of agricultural sites and factories making raw materials and packaging. Lots of these, again, in the global south. And in terms of detecting human rights violations, it can be a very complicated thing, because often the employees are, there's a fear in them reporting violations to Unilever, and many of them don't even know that. But so what we've done is we built language processing where we'll scan various local news publications, because often these human rights issues they'll appear as a small article talking about a certain factory in a certain location, and then we can pick these up through these models and then go and intervene and engage with those suppliers. So there's an element of detection there when there are human rights violations taking place.
That's very interesting, because that goes back to Ken's point, actually. I'd like to bring you in here, Ken, because that's an example of looking for unethical practices in your supply chain and using large language models to pick up on news that might be related to particular factories. You spoke about anti-corruption. So these are also ways in which, I guess, contributing, answering Steve's question, is reducing inequalities through tackling corruption, unethical labour practices. Ken, did you want to add anything to that?
It was already mentioned, but I think the biggest issue with the Global South is the digital justice issue. So again, this has been talked about in all of the different conferences, policymakers concerned. How can we really increase the number of people who have, first of all, access to the internet to begin with, let alone AI. So this is, I think, going to be a long-term type of project and challenge that the Global South, together with help from the Global North, we're going to have to overcome.
Thanks very much. maybe you in the last part of this, thinking, we've only got 7 more years apparently to achieve the UN SDGs. So where do we focus our efforts? Going back to what Taryn was saying, there's this 80-20 rule, isn't there? That what are the 20% of things we should focus 80% of our efforts on? I think you touched on climate change, but where can we, working across sector, we've got many sectors represented here, make the maximum impact in the next 7 years? Who would like to start there? Taryn?
I can kick off on that one. I think what I would say is connectivity. Right, I'd come at it from a slightly different perspective, which is there are a number of solutions within different goals that are not being shared or not, they're not known about. And it's like that's another area where universities can take the lead in terms of looking at those interconnectivities and examples of models that are used in one context that could be appropriate in another. So, for example, models in predictive or precision farming being made available, say satellite imagery type models for looking at clean water and predicting pollution in water or algal blooms in rivers and lakes and so on. So those are that building out those cross connectivities, right? That would be one way where we could accelerate things in a more effective way.
Thank you. Lewis, any ideas? Where should we focus our efforts?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I was keen to speak here today, because I don't know if it's become obvious yet, I'm not an AI specialist, but I think there's a big parallel that can be drawn between manufacturing and the infrastructure that the AI systems run on. So data centers, you can think of them as, as knowledge factories. They have every right to be there as a factory making goods and selling them for profit. And these factories, use huge amounts of energy, as we've already mentioned. The energy system is responsible for about 75% of global emissions. So in tackling climate, the solutions that these data centers need to embed are the exact same solutions as manufacturing and real estate equally. There's so much crossover, and again, it's about AI has so many applications in optimizing the energy system. So smart grids, renewable energy systems optimizations, many more examples. We could go on all day about examples, but there's so much space for AI to kind of cross-cut that, and 3/4 of GHG output can be tackled.
Thank you. Chris?
Okay, so, goodness, there's such a broad question. But clearly, our ability, so I would advocate that, food production is really a key, and we want to ensure that our food system is secure. So, and again, my focus is food production. But I think the key is we really need not just old data, but real-time data, right? We need large networks of sensors that are out there collecting information about food production systems. We also need the advanced compute power and the algorithmic layers, the digital twins that are really going to give us the predictions of whether this particular crop is going to be viable in this particular location in 3 years from now when the temperature goes up. These are really, really critical issues because it could really devastate the food production system. So I think there's really important to focus in on this area. The impact of AI per se, we've talked about that. I think there are different ways of doing AI. We obviously talk about these big data centers that we need, the cooling systems we need. I think there's also, different approaches to building models. We build very large simulations, in the digital twin world, but these can also be the footprint of these large twins can be ameliorated by using additional techniques, emulators specifically, based on things like deep Gaussian processes. So these effectively give you a way of summarizing some of the models you have. So they're much smaller and they're still interrogatable, can still deliver insights to drive your predictions. But I'm saying we can do AI differently. There are also opportunities to optimize the way we achieve AI. I also think, so this is again another slightly different track. This is really about our digital farms, the way we actually leverage the sensor networks. There's all sorts of experimentation that we still need to do with new farming processes. For example, I did recently hear about advanced rock weathering. Could solve 40% of our carbon sequestration problems by 2050. We need a lot more investment in understanding the capabilities of rock weathering. It sounds very, very exciting, but having proper biomonitored farms that can enumerate and calculate the exact degree of carbon sequestration that's possible using those techniques is really critical, particularly if we're going to give out credits to farmers for changing their farming practices to adopt rock weathering and accelerate the carbon sequestration. So, okay, these are some of the burning issues that are in my mind at the moment.
Thank you. So just 1 minute left. So Ken, do you want to have a final thought?
This is something that we had talked about before, but one of the major challenges I think now is how research and development being carried out by academic institutions is now pretty much been, in many ways, been overtaken by the large big tech firms. The roles have changed. How can we address this challenge? And I think one is that it came out in the previous panel. I think governmental funding is, I think, necessary, which could really uplift the academic institutions in many ways. So there are several great examples happening in the United States. They're always driven by, obviously, innovation and commerce. But just this past Monday, Biden passed this, gave out this executive order on the defense production, which is going to highlight, again, this support of research and development. Also, in the spring of this year, the US government announced that they would support and financially the founding of the 7 research institutes, AI institutes, in different academic institutions. And also this past Monday, the Biden administration announced that they're going to launch and, again, fund 31 tech hubs all across the United States. So I think this type of partnership between the government and academic entities is really crucial to be able to produce the number of excellent talent, which, again, is so needed, and also as a way of enhancing the and giving, again, empowering the academic institutions. And overall, this is another way that I think, as we say in the United Nations, a way of protecting and promoting the international rule of law, human rights, and also democracy.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we're at the end of our session, so it's been fascinating to hear all of your views. So we need to do a lot more over the next 7 years to work in a much more transformational way across sectors to be able to use AI so that it does good in the world. Thanks very much, everyone. And now there's going to be lunch provided, so please enjoy. Thanks very much for your sponsorship.